Good morning. We want to continue that story of OpenXR and sort of that evolution. Obviously, PC VR's dominant decided that VRs aren't dumb monitors. They have a bunch of responsibility, especially input responsibility. OpenXR's been established, and around this time, or way before this time actually, so going back to 2013 even, I remember having a lot of conversations with a very smart man. He's tech director of Climax. He's got a lovely YouTube channel, by the way, where he builds an 8-bit CPU from scratch, pipeline CPU. Well worth a watch. I'll link it in the description thing. But anyway, he's the first person who starts talking to me about Climax doing it wrong. We're doing it all wrong. And he starts talking about this concept of split rendering and how the stream of data we're sending, which, remember the history of this all, is it's a dumb monitor, right? So we're just sending like an HDMI or a equivalent signal, a video signal encoded. And he's like, no, we're doing it all wrong. This is what we should be spending. Long technical breakdown, and I won't go all into that. Very smart man, very, very smart man. He was the first person ever to talk to me about this concept. Later at Sony, I heard more about this concept, and I've heard about it since from other places as well. But that's where we start talking about the streamers. Coincidentally, Google's trying to get onto the hype train. They do Google Cardboard, which wasn't original. There was many other research projects like it. It was a bit of a poison pill for the VR industry. I don't think anyone involved in Google Cardboard from an engineering side had any malice. I think they were like, this is a cool idea, let's try this. I think it was more just one of those sort of hack projects. But I think certain key leadership in Google probably saw it as a good like poison pill for VR. And the whole, I think it was New York Times pack-in, it just poisoned a lot of people to VR because they had this really shitty stereoscopic fucking Victorian experience of VR with their phone. But good thing, it did sort of at the same time help some of the visibility for the Samsung collaboration for the Gear VR, which is basically a fancier version of Cardboard VR. Gear VR did a lot of cool things. Again, history's too long to get into it here, and I wasn't as involved in it. Like, I didn't have much exposure to it. One of my friends, they're Triangular Pixels, their studio got started because of Gear VR. Very, very cool. So I remember it very detailed. Like, I remember the period because they split off from Sony around about 20... I can't remember the exact dates. And Gear VR was an interesting concept, but it also showed, like, Carmack at the time was getting very frustrated with the sort of bloated nature of Oculus. Also, another time I want to tell a story or talk about how he ended up there, because that's a whole other interesting tale. Normal VR thing, and Carmack's like, no, all of this bloat, we should be doing VR better. I think it should be a standalone package. No one believes him. He does the Gear VR thing. He fights really hard to get the Quest made. And, as part of that, it all, proves, Quest 1 proves how good an idea that is. Because the Gear was started to prove it, but it wasn't great. Whereas the Quest 1 was like, ooh. And I remember the like tie-ins and stuff. Like, the Samsung Gear was like peak hype machine of Quest. We now have this standalone headset. Getting a video signal onto the headset in a low latency way, starting with Gear but then going onto the Quest, is actually a really hard problem. Now, I've got some background here because when I was doing all the stuff I was doing at Sony, I was doing a lot of stuff with Twitch and YouTube, and doing a lot of stuff with the share button. The history of the share button is a long discussion, but encoding video is difficult. And on the PlayStation 4, we actually had special codec chips on there just for the share button, which were originally like a lot of the infrastructure that was there was originally because 3D TV needed more stuff, and then it was adjusted and long story. Point is, sending especially a low latency encoded video signal is a very difficult problem, and we didn't have this dedicated video pipe in an Android device as like you take in a signal. So how do we solve this? And I have very little involvement in this. On the meta side, I don't know the story very well. I know the engineering problems from other places. So at the time, PlayStation 4, we were doing a lot of this investigation because there was this thing called Asian. It led on to some stuff. It's a long story. I was talking to a lot of engineers about very similar problems to do with the share button and to do with console phone companion apps and stuff. There's a lot of parallel evolution of technology here. And I'm not on a random tangent with the split rendering thing, by the way. Anyway, we now enter the land where Quest makes, I forget if it was for Quest 1 or 2. I think it was for Quest 2. Yeah, I think it was for Quest 2. They finally crack it and they make a wired USB streaming solution, right? And they solve a lot of the problems, but people are like, I don't want the wire, I don't want the wire. So, one sec. Sorry, something came up and I just had to quickly move. Quest has happened and a lot of people are like, oh, we want to do PCVR with Quest. We want to do this wide cable, and a lot of people are like, oh, it can't be done. Comet kind of does the back of the napkin mat. He does this light speed thinking stuff, which speed of light thinking, which is like, what are the actual physical limitations? What's the hardware capable? And he's like, it totally can be done. A team does it. As I say, not involved in that, have very little knowledge of that. But it gets done. We're solving very similar problems over at PlayStation. A lot of people are working on this sort of problem space. And at the time, this is before the USB 3 spec is nailed, so there's a lot of like throughput issues. There's a lot of, do you have a specialist cable? Because a lot of people don't know this, but the really long USB streaming cables are actually optical. It's like, how cool is that? They're not because you literally start to get latency problems and signal loss problems. We then get to the point where someone's like, why do I need the wire? And again, speed of light thinking, you don't. And Carmack says as much, but basically because of the realities of moving from the lab to the real world, a lot of very sensible people are going, can't be done. Turns out it could. Turns out that a virtual desktop gets there and does it really well. And then Meta tries to squash them. There's a lot of really anti-competitive bullshit here. The whole interesting story worth looking into. There's a reason why media consumption didn't blow up sooner on VR, and a lot of it's to do with the 30% tax and shitty platform practices. But that's a whole separate. They do it. Virtual Desktop does it, proves it can be done, and does it well. Does it really well. This basically forces Meta's hand to do AirLink, is what they call it. And as I say, there's a lot of problems to be solved. Thankfully, Carmack had done the async spacewalk stuff, which is just an evolution of some other stuff. Like, it wasn't like, oh my god, you need revolutionary stuff. Like, a lot of this is brick on brick on brick technology building. It was really good. I don't want to understate it in any way. But everyone was developing stuff like that, and he just developed a very good version of it. Because we were looking at stuff like that in Sony as well. We're now in the AirLinks world. In the AirLink world, we know that you need to be smart about how you stream it. It can't be an uncompressed signal. So we're now like encoding the signal, but we already started encoding the signal down and doing compression stuff to account for the cable link solution, because the bandwidth of USB 2 point whatever we were working with then wasn't good enough either. So we're now in the world of, okay, the PC is doing a lot of rendering work, it's getting a frame buffer, and then we're video encoding it down and we're sending it through the pipe to the headset, and then the headset's doing a last minute reprojection and some last minute work to sort of account for a bit of latency, to try bring that motion to photon latency down. And unless you're moving your head crazy wild, we can probably reproject the frame enough that we solve a lot of the motion sickness issues. Okay, fantastic, great. But now we're crushing a lot of the blacks, which is like a classic encoding problem. The encoding stuff becomes really difficult depending on what display technology you're using, and the streaming tech is flaky. It is really flaky. Now at the same time, we've got HTC playing in the space, we've got Pico playing in the space. They're falling behind on the software side. They're all trying to catch up. And at the same time, sort of unrelated, it looks like, story of cloud rendering is happening, and everyone's frustrated with how underpowered these mobile standalone headsets are. So there's a lot of efforts to go like, well, instead of streaming from the PC, what if we stream from the cloud? And a lot of people forget this with all the Google hype around stuff, but the first real productive one of this, I always forget what it was called before PlayStation acquired it, was a cloud gaming thing long ago in the sort of PS3 era, and PlayStation acquired the most successful one. It has been running PlayStation now profitably and consecutively for many years. Like, it's proved they know, but we also know that gamers don't really like it as much as you think, and there's a lot of problems, but PlayStation is the leader in this. They're the quiet leader in this, because like obviously you get Nvidia making a big noise, you get Xbox making a big noise, and obviously Google entered the space and made a really big noise and fucked it up again. Another story, another time. But people are like, oh, maybe instead of from your PC, we do this from the cloud. And this gets a lot of excitement and a lot of interest. And internally in Meta, this fucks up a lot of the sorry, my watch is buzzing. A lot of the PC link work got I don't want to say kneecapped, but anyway, got underinvested in, because there's no real reason for Meta to invest in PC, right? Because they're walled garden, they're moat. Remember, they switched from being a hardware company to a software company. They're moat to standalone, and they see this whole opportunity as a new way to see the market and such. And Quest 2 is doing bang on. So why would we reinvest in PC? It's kind of a thing. No, PC link degrades. It's horrible. Virtual desktop's great. Virtual desktop's going from strength to strength. They get into some court faff with Meta, but they survive it. They kick down doors. Virtual desktop's doing great. But virtual desktop is very much like the Linux of OpenXR runtimes. I mean, they didn't even have a dedicated OpenXR runtime at the time. They were sort of plugging into, I think it was Steam VR through the OpenVR API, if I recall. I can't actually recall the details. But eventually they developed their own OpenXR runtime to make the whole stack work better for them. A lot of really smart engineering work goes into enabling Link to send through frame stuff better and encode stuff through better. And yeah, the whole cloud problem's happening. And all this while this is happening, I'm hearing more talk about the split rendering concept. Why are we sending frame buffers through to this hardware that's good enough to rasterize some stuff? Could we not? But it's a harder problem than you think. Yeah, it's... I really want to talk about the Sony stuff that we went through, and a lot of the API stuff, because friction points aren't necessarily where people think, especially when it comes to game developers. Game developers know how to make a frame buffer. They know how to prepare a frame buffer. They know what to do with it. And so when you ask game developers to do anything else with their rendering, they get very suspicious. They don't like it. It faffs with old technique. Engines need to be re-engineered. There's a lot of work to be gone there. But yeah, so people have been playing around with this split rendering concept. I think it definitely will come into the near future of VR hardware, without a doubt. I don't think this sending frame buffers across connections is going to be long-term the solution. I just don't. Anyway, at the same time as all this is kicking off, 5G, Wi-Fi 6E stuff is kicking off, and 5G is a technology looking for a problem to solve. And cloud gaming is happening, and VR is happening, and everyone's like, oh, okay, we can do it over 5G, guys. But it turns out that a lot of the original hype in those early engineering meetings started really running amok when we got into a war. Like this is years ago, but there was a war with Huawei and China, and there was a lot of the best cellular infrastructure no longer could be deployed, and a lot of the early specs for 5G were pushed back on because basically cost of deployment, and there wasn't a killer enough feature and technology fights and everything. So 5G as a spec got way watered down. Not even all 5G is millimeter, I believe. I'm not a radio engineer. I've spoken to people on this topic and they're like, 5G is a travesty because it's not what it was meant to be. But it really put a problem in the whole stream. So anyway, coming up to modern times, because I want to wrap this video up. I'm working at Adobe I'm working on Modeler. And Modeler, wait, no, hold on, I need to rotate that mug. I'm working on Modeler. And Modeler just can't run on standalone. I mean, there's a version of it that probably could run on standalone, but it would just do less. I do think there's value in Modeler on standalone, but Modeler needs a beefy PC as it's written now. And yeah, so... But Adobe's a big player, Modeler's a big player, and it's not the only one, right? There's this productivity apps, the Apple headsets happening. Everyone's like hyped for that. I'll talk about Vario and Apple headset another time. But productivity is the big topic of the day because we need to move beyond gaming. If you remember the Quest Pro and workrooms and all. And so we're getting a lot of conversations about Link, and I'm speaking to everyone about Link. Speaking to Pico about Link, I'm speaking to Meta about Link, and I'm basically telling everyone Link is shit because Link is shit. And the thing is if you're a gamer, you put up with a lot more than if you're just an artist trying to use the product and you just, it's your job. And this has now just become IT hassle. It's not become setting up a toy, it's become IT hassle. And so the PC VR experience, especially for productivity, is just horrendous. Round about this time, remote desktop, because the Apple Vision doesn't launch with a link to NAT, which they'll get, and it'll be beautiful, and it'll work so well, because that's what Apple does. I fucking hate Apple, but that's honestly, Apple's design sense is almost unmatched, and their ability to vertically integrate is almost on console level. So it'll work really well. It's like if PlayStation makes like a PlayStation Quest headset and they want to do streaming to headset, it'll work beautifully, because it's a vertical stack. Quest is going to mess with all the solvable problem, but yeah, as we said. Anyway, I'm rambling. We're talking about the productivity problem, and all of a sudden gets a lot more investment. Lynx gets a lot more investment, and then what comes onto the scene? Steam Link. And stuff happens there. It's really interesting. And now Steam Link's on Pico, and now Steam Link's an alternative. And unlike Virtual Desktop, which takes a lot of setup, can be tuned in a million ways, Steam Link just kind of works. And immediately, anyone who is a PC-heavy VR program that has any kind of analytics starts to see how much of their audience is using Steam Link. And you're like, Steam Link was a real shot across the bow and really started to get them to pay more attention seriously to that. And the Apple headset, sorry, that was a tangent I went on with the Apple headset, all of a sudden got the remote desktop part, which again, Virtual Desktop kills that, became more important, because it's like, we want multiple productivity windows. And that started with Horizon workrooms as well and stuff. But yeah, interesting problem space. But as I say, there's a lot of fascinating little tangents I could go on here. Like for Pico and those that implemented streaming on top of Steam, there's a bunch of Steam VR functions that are expected to go over DisplayPort. So like for a while, the desktop view in Steam VR via streaming was disabled for bandwidth issues in a bunch of streaming runtimes, and it's a lot of hacks, and I think we're very much in a placeholder technology with the streaming tech. I think it'll stick around longer than people want it to stick around, because people know how to prepare a frame buffer, and then if they can give that frame buffer and they can send it along and it gets encoded and streamed. But there's so many pledges in that tech stack, because as you can sort of see through this rambling history, it was not built for purpose, and it was all... So yeah, I think the split rendering thing that James spoke to me about in 2013, I think it was, because it was before it was at Sony, so yeah, it must have been like 2013. I think that's ultimately where we're headed, but it requires some brave hardware design from someone who is able to make some like interesting calls on that. And I'll be very interested to see. Vertex is licking the litter, not the litter, the dirt bag. Anyway, I need to wrap this up. It's a longer one. I hope that explains a bit more about the streaming world and how we sort of got to PC streaming and why PC streaming sucks. I mean, whenever someone says to me, Meta doesn't care about PC VR, I'm like, give them a reason to care. Because honestly, at the moment, the only reason to compare is to stop you using Steam Link. Come on, you go inside, dum-dum. I'm going inside with you for a sec. There we go. The issue is that it's not a moat they can build. It's not necessarily good business for them. But if there's productivity apps, if there's other reasons, or if there's like locking out a competitor, there's reasons for them to invest there. Companies not going to spend money that doesn't interest them. That's the thing. I'm really excited for this space, by the way. I think all this space is good. It's good. But yeah, with that, I'm gonna wrap it, put it up, and upload. Bit of a longer ramble, but that's the mood I'm in. That's the mood I'm in. Questions really help direct this flow of consciousness. And I think I'm more than halfway through this 30-day video challenge thing. Okay, anyway, ta-ta.